more Bitcoin than there should be. And in practice, really about the only thing you can do is everybody agree to rewind to a point in the past. Which, could you imagine undoing a day of Bitcoin transactions? Like how disruptive that would be to exchanges? So I'm extremely pleased and extremely proud of that invariant checking. Lastly, of the things that I'm going to highlight today is rekeyable accounts. Accounts are real things on the XRP Ledger. They have balances, they have owners, they have properties that can be changed. This is unlike UTXOs on the Bitcoin blockchain that don't have properties. Well, UTXO has a balance and it has some key that can sort of unlock it most of the time, but that's the end of its properties. So imagine if you're a charity or even a large company, you have an account on the ledger. You receive funds into that account, and there's somebody in your company who, or some process in your company that processed this, that can allow those transactions to be signed to access your funds. So say you're a charity and you just want US dollars. So you hire somebody to take all the donations that you've received and somehow turn them into US dollars in your bank account. Now let's say at some point in the future you change your mind, you say, okay, now we want to hold XRP, we want to hold Bitcoin, we don't want to convert them into dollars immediately. So you fire the person or the company that was doing that, or maybe the employee leaves. In blockchains like Bitcoin, you have to change your receiving address at this point because there's no other way to change the key. There's no other way to lock out the company that had access to your account before. That's very disruptive, particularly for charities that have public, well-known addresses, right? There's a donation address for, let's say, the Electronic Frontier Foundation or your favorite charity. If they have to change those receiving addresses, that's very disruptive. So the XRP Ledger has accounts as things that have properties. So what's been going on this year? I mean, it's just been incredible. It's just been incredible, the pace of development and innovation. You guys should give yourselves a hand, seriously, because we cannot do everything, we will do everything, and we don't know what people, this is an amazing thing to say, but like very often, we don't know what people are using the ledger for because they don't tell us. Like if you don't tell us, we don't know, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on that we don't know. There was one time where there was a multi-million-dollar a day remittance pipeline on the XRP Ledger. We figured it out months later, looking at the data. Like no, but like, it's a public good. It's a public resource. We at Ripple are focused on enabling developers to build on the XRP Ledger easily. We provide tools, services, and so on. We're one contributor to the global and growing development and evolution of the XRP Ledger. And it has just been amazing to be part of this community. It has just been the most fantastic experience. I think I speak for everybody at Ripple. It has just been amazing working with everyone. We've been focused on new native capabilities. We've been focused on sort of the periphery around the ledger. And we've been focused on making the XRP Ledger easier to use for developers. The developer community, even in the past year, in 2022, the growth has just been incredible. Just comparing Apex this year, if you were here last year, most of you weren't, the growth is just amazing. And I think awareness of the XRP Ledger as a layer 1 option has been increasing. Those speeds, fees, scalability, low energy uses, and I think the track record, 10 years running, and the built-in DEX, tokenization, sourcing efficient liquidity. The XRP Ledger rises to the fore as a core opportunity to differentiate against other chains with these features. So I guess I have to name a few of them. The big one that's on everybody's mind today is XLS20D. Yeah. I know there's a lot of people here who contributed to that effort. And I just want to say, like, again, it's a testament to the strength of the community. That is not, we know so little about, and we tried, but the space is so rapidly changing, and we don't know we know what people are doing, but what we don't know is what people aren't doing because the tools and technologies they need to do it aren't there. And it doesn't do us any good to build the tools to let people do the things they're already doing because they obviously already have them or they wouldn't be doing it, right? So like, we need people to tell us, what are you not doing? What do you need? And so that community feedback, we guessed at what we thought people needed, and sometimes we were right, and sometimes we were wrong, because we can only tell what people are doing. So that community feedback was fantastic. We had explosive interest from developers in building around NFT projects, and developers at Ripple proposed and built native support for NFTs with that feedback from the community. So we introduced the XLS20D specification in the first quarter. Now, as many of you probably know, Win found a way to make NFTs without XLS20D support using the issued assets. And it's amazing. I mean, it's a fantastic engineering feat because people would have said that like there's no way to do it. He found a way to do it, but you know, it's using thrust to make a pig fly. It's very impressive that you can make a pig fly, but we don't take pigs across the country for very good reasons, right? So not to take away from that, that was amazing, but it was not the scalable solution that we needed. And I think that sort of lit a fire under a lot of people to say, well, we need to come up with a proper way to do this, a way that fits with the, you know, the XRP Ledger philosophy. So he added native NFT, XLS20D adds native NFT object support with functions like minting, burning, trading, royalties, a URI for metadata, and critically an efficient storage mechanism. So there wasn't anything in the XRP Ledger previously that you needed to store a lot of. And for an NFT proposal, you really want people to be able to store a lot of them in some kind of an efficient way. And so we developed a pages mechanism, which sort of compresses the ledger storage space so that you can have a large number of NFTs without creating that kind of impact. The proposal was perfected with the feedback from the community. We got suggestions through GitHub. Many of you spoke to us directly. That was probably the first time that I really felt like there was a development community. Like before, patches trickled in. Well, hooks I'll talk about later. I mean that obviously. You know, but this was the first case where we really experienced directly that sort of collaboration process that we want, where something's, you know, was sort of a back and forth about a feature. So the amendment opened for voting in the second quarter, and you know, we're extremely excited. So like I said, it enables minting, trading, and burning. It has additional features like automatic royalties, co-ownership of assets, features that people told us they needed. And it does not require smart contracts. So this is an advantage and a disadvantage, and I think there's like a significant sweet spot of use cases that XLS20D targets. If you need a smart contract to do something weird and specific, if you want to have male and female NFTs that mate with each other on-chain, you can't do that with XLS20D, right? You need a smart contract to do that. You can do it off-chain, but that's not necessarily the solution you want. But 80%, 90% of the use cases just need that basic functionality. And the advantage of not using smart contracts, of instead having smart transactors, is the cost is much lower. And I think another thing, we've recently seen people who've had NFTs stolen from them. And one of the mechanisms by which an NFT is stolen is a user is duped into authorizing a smart contract whose functionality they don't understand. Smart contracts add a layer of risk to NFTs as they also add a layer of functionality. So by eliminating those smart contracts, yes, you do lose some of that functionality that some use cases need. But for other use cases that need the functionality that's, you know, minting, burning, holding, transferring, royalties, offers, that need that basic functionality, you don't have the risk associated with smart contracts and thefts. We do anticipate that there'll be increased network activity as people use XLS20D. Load will go up. The 1.9.1 release contains significant effort by RippleX Engineering and others aimed at that. We've conducted performance testing, and then we reached the point where we were confident to vote yes on the XLS20D amendment. The validator community is now voting on the proposed amendment. As most of you probably know, there must be at least an 80% yes vote in order for an amendment to activate, and that has to be held for 2 weeks. So about a week ago, the amendment passed the 80% majority. So, and it's now pretty close to 90%. So, yes. And I want to say a few things. So first of all, obviously I want to thank the people who voted yes and who helped speed this along. But I also think that it is extremely important to acknowledge the people who voted no, and especially. And this is like, why do we have this voting process? Well, one reason is to make sure that we're not enabling functionality that could have bugs or could threaten the stability of the network. Blockchains are hard to change for very good reasons. Bitcoin, the pace of innovation in Bitcoin is very slow, and part of that is because it's very important to the community that they not break it, right? One of the things that people like about blockchains is this level of assurance that I'm pretty confident it's going to work next year as well as it works today, and we never want to break that. And I think when people say, no, I'm not convinced, I mean, if they're just being obstructionist, yeah, I mean, don't thank them for that. But I mean, if they are putting the effort in to make sure that we are taking the time. You know, it's annoying when we don't have functionality immediately. Everybody wants, like, I want it now, right? You want it now. But it's critical that we not break, you know, a system that's handling billions of dollars worth of transactions. We don't want to break it. And we take that responsibility seriously, and we think that when the community takes that seriously, yeah, it's a bit annoying when, you know, people want to do things, but like, it's super critical, and I think we should thank the people who looked at the proposal and said, hey, I have questions. You need to reassure me that this is not going to break, that we don't want to break the ledger for payments, right? Could you imagine if NFTs were fantastic but we broke payments? Like, that would be the worst victory ever, right? So I do want to take the time to thank the people who said no for good reasons. I mean, that's what we want, right? That's what we want. We want people who care and who take the time to make smart decisions. And yes, that does mean we can't always move as quickly as we want to. Project Clio has been a huge effort, started quite some time ago. The beta was finally released in the first half of this year. There were a lot of technical challenges, but it creates a massive storage reduction for servers that handle queries from clients. And that is critical to scaling the ledger. I think, like, we all understand that, like, people will talk about transaction per second limits of the consensus layer. And obviously, the network can't go any faster than consensus can. But you could imagine a world where consensus could be ridiculously fast, and then wallets can't keep up, right? If your wallet doesn't work, from your point of view, the XRP Ledger's down. It doesn't matter if, you know, ledgers are closing every 5 seconds. They have 50,000 transactions, and the core is working fine. If the infrastructure around that can't keep up, then the system is unusable. And what Clio did is it created a new way to scale that sort of next layer around the XRP ledger by implementing the API, the software tool, the software interface that developers talk to, optimized for scalability and availability. We run a cluster of servers that provide that functionality. The XRPL Foundation does. Those servers will often handle 40,000 queries a second. So scaling them is extremely critical. Clio is a major effort in that regard. Clio stores ledger and transaction data in much less space than RippleD does. RippleD is designed to close ledgers quickly, to run transactions quickly, to reach consensus quickly, to publish ledgers quickly. It's not really designed for a wallet to ask questions like, you know, how much money do I have? How much will this transaction cost? Like, those types of queries about the state of the network shouldn't be competing for resources with things like consensus. And so Clio gives a much greater separation. So it removes the burden of handling those API requests from the software that's managing the consensus layer of the network. This will allow more users and more developers to reliably interact with the ledger and really help RippleD process transactions. RippleD is what we call the XRP Ledger software. We need to rename that to XRPLD or something, but still RippleD from the early days. Names are hard to change. So that will help RippleD process transactions more efficiently because it won't be constantly dealing with queries. It is so important that infrastructure be stable. If you interact with the XRP Ledger through an exchange and your exchange's servers are unstable, you're going to get a terrible experience, right? You're going to make a deposit, and it's going to take a while. The ledger could process it in 6 seconds, but if it takes the exchange 2 minutes because their internal processes are backed up, or a withdrawal takes 20 minutes because their internal processes are backed up, then your experience is still going to be bad. It's actually pretty funny. In the early days, we actually had exchanges who had to upgrade a lot of their internal processes because the ledger was so fast, right? If they take 6 blocks to confirm a Bitcoin transaction, which could be an hour, they don't have to process the queue every minute or every 5 minutes. They could process the queue every 15 minutes. And that produced a poor experience for XRP Ledger users. So the stuff around the ledger has to be as good as the ledger, otherwise there's no benefit. So Project Clio is a major improvement in providing that large-scale access to the XRP Ledger's features for developers, wallets, exchanges, and all ledger users. Which brings us to hooks. This effort really, I think this is still the largest effort on the XRP Ledger to date that Ripple had almost literally nothing to do with. Like, I mean, we had nothing to do with the concept formation, and it came completely from XRPL Labs. They've also worked on things like adding escrow and payment channel support for issued assets, expanding the signer list from 8 to 32 signers, adding some metadata, all kinds of other features. But Hooks is in a class by itself. Hooks is a bespoke light smart contract solution for the XRP Ledger. So it's complementary to an EVM sidechain. A sidechain that supports the Ethereum virtual machine will allow you to take Ethereum, smart contracts designed for platforms like Ethereum and those that are compatible, and use them with minimal changes. It's very powerful, but it brings some of the disadvantages of those platforms in terms of the complexity and cost. Hooks is like built around the XRP Ledger's philosophy of smart transactors and of sort of light, efficient mechanisms that are cheap and that don't have the resource consumption. Hooks cannot do everything that an EVM sidechain can do. But again, like I was saying with XLS20D, it cuts out a significant fraction of the interesting use cases and provides better support for them than a more flexible solution that can be everything to everyone can do, because it's more focused, it's more efficient, it's better designed to do what it's designed to do. So super, super excited about that. So it fits with XRP Ledger's core design principles. And its feature set covers many of the DeFi use cases. You cannot do everything you could do with an EVM sidechain with hooks. It responds to transactions in a certain way. It's limited to capability of what it can do. But again, it cuts out a large subset of the interesting use cases and it enables them. So very, very excited about that. That could be enabled on the XRP Ledger main chain. Whereas like EVM smart contracts, if you enabled those types of smart contracts on the main chain, you would lose the functionality for payments. Like cost would go up, throughput would go down, and we would lose some of the things that make the XRP Ledger great. So, rather than having this great payments but no smart contract functionality at all, or full smart contract functionality, but anybody use Ethereum for payments, right? You can't, because the speed is so low and the cost is so high. So this gives us a nice middle ground that gives us, for a significant set of interesting use cases, it gives us a solution. Now, something near and dear to my heart, the automated market maker specification. I almost said automated money maker, which actually is kind of, it's actually pretty apropos, right? So the XRP Ledger is a leading enabler of DeFi with features like the DEX and payments because of the design of the protocol. And the one thing that we have not had that traditionally most, I think 90% of DEXs have automated market makers. They're built around it. The XRP Ledger's DEX is built around a simple central limit order book rather than an automated market maker. But I think if you have both of them, I think this is a case where it just blows away OR. The automated market maker addresses most of the pain points that people face in the decentralized liquidity landscape today. So the DEX launched in 2012. It allowed tokenization of any kind of asset and the ability to trade and move them in just seconds on chain. It provided globally competitive liquidity, but there was no way to get yield. And sometimes there just wasn't the sort of liquidity that people might need. So RippleX focused on differentiating our DEX with automated market making in conjunction with the central limit order book and integrated with payments so that these three features work together to provide a feature set that is unmatched. This is not everybody else has automated market makers, now we have them too. This is everybody else had automated market makers because they couldn't build an order book. Imagine an order book on Ethereum. If you think about how order books work, as prices change, people place offers at different rates. They cancel previous offers. If it costs you $13 to place an offer that nobody's likely to take, just to provide liquidity in case someone needs it, that's completely untenable. If your transactions take 10 minutes to confirm, you can't track price changes. We have our own order book because we can, and the functionality of both of them together is just, I don't have words to convey how excited I am about this feature. In October, we're very hopeful that developers will be able to use and test an early version on the developer network so people can build front-end UIs, integrate with new applications, and understand the features that it can provide. I would love to do the whole talk on the automated market maker and get really deep in the weeds, and I'm going to have to fight myself not to get very technical because this is sort of engineering perfection that certain things have. Any one of you who's worked on something, it doesn't have to be software, it could be cars, it could be bicycles, but anything where you're building something, you reach a point where everything works together and it just fits really nice, and you're like, yes, this is like really nice. And then there'll be a couple warts somewhere, but they really stand out because the rest of the design is so great, and we're reaching that point. So I want to talk about what makes this so amazing to me, and I will try not to get too deep in the weeds, but if you get me started after talking about this, you'll probably have to smack me to get me to shut up. So I'm almost not kidding. So people who provide liquidity to the automated market maker. So the automated market maker, in order to trade, it needs assets to trade with. And so people have to sort of loan it assets. They put the assets in the automated market makers pools, and they get back liquidity tokens. These are tokens, issued assets that are tradable on the DEX that represent their proportional ownership. So these tokens can be traded on the DEX. You can hold them. You don't have to cash them in for your share of the pools if you want. You can just sort of move them around and use them as an asset. And for US holders, this should be very tax efficient. Your gains won't be realized until you sell or dispose of the liquidity token. So if you put a bunch of XRP and a bunch of Bitcoin in a liquidity pool for an AMM, you'll get back some liquidity tokens, which you can just hold. The AMM will do its thing, hopefully producing return for you, and then you can sell those liquidity tokens when you're done, and then that will be, if you're in the US, that's a taxable event, but your money can grow tax-free. Obviously not tax advice, consult experts, but I think we got it. One of the other cool secret sauces is this continuous auction mechanism, which auctions off the right to arbitrage against the automated market maker. So this is something that's completely unique, not available anywhere else. The automated market maker, arbitrageurs will trade against the automated market maker when its pricing is wrong. So the automated market maker doesn't know what the prices are, right? It doesn't have an oracle. It's completely automated and algorithmic. And so its prices can become wrong due to external price action, right? The price of Bitcoin goes up, the price of XRP goes down, the price of things change. And arbitrageurs will trade against it and they'll make a profit. What the automated market maker does is the arbitrager world is fiercely competitive, right? You're an arbitrager and there's an arbitrager right next to you. If you have a trade that makes you $1, you have to think, do I make this trade and make $1, or do I wait until maybe I'll make $2, $3, or $5? But if you wait too long, somebody else is going to snap it up before you. We want arbitrageurs to work quicker. We don't want arbitrageurs to make the pool suffer such large losses. So what we did is we gave a designated arbitrager who pays a fee for this execution privileges that will allow them to arbitrage more rapidly than anybody else will. And if they're diligent, they should be able to capture a significant fraction of the arbitrage opportunity. Because the pool sells this privilege, it should reap as its own profit a significant fraction of what the arbitrager would make. So say you can make $100 a day arbitraging against a pool, and I can make $100 a day arbitraging against that same pool. We'll compete, right? We'll bid for that, and maybe I'll bid, $90. And now the pool just made $90 and I only made $10 instead of the pool losing $100 and me making it. So the pool charges for arbitrage rights, and it does it using its own liquidity tokens as the currency by which you buy these arbitrage slots, and it destroys them when they're paid to the pool. So arbitrageurs who want those arbitrage slots have to acquire liquidity tokens either by putting money into the pool or buying them from other people, and then they're destroyed. And if there are fewer liquidity tokens outstanding, the value of each one goes up because it's a claim against the assets of the pool. Now, another thing that happens is volatility. So external prices change, right? The price of XRP changes, the price of Bitcoin changes. That means the value of the assets the pool holds changes. And that drives up both arbitrager activity. There's only an opportunity to arbitrage if the price is out of whack. One source of the price being out of whack would be changes in the price. But also natural ledger activity, people making payments and offers. All of these things trade against the AMM instance, and the AMM makes a spread. But there's something else going on that's almost more exciting, which is volatility is harvested by the automated market maker. Normally, volatility just results in risk and a reduction in yield. But here, it's a gain in yield. The automated market maker actually implements a trading strategy that converts volatility into yield. I could go on for a very long time about that, but I'm not going to because it's going to take us way in the weeds. But if you see me, again, if you see me outside, trading strategies are something that I'm very, very interested in. If you think about what an automated market maker does, when the price goes up, it sells, and when the price goes down, it buys. That strategy, if you imagine if you hold Apple stock and the price goes up and you sell and then the price goes back down and you buy, you make a profit. If the price goes down and you buy and the price goes back up, you make a profit, and you sell, you make a profit. That's what an automated market maker does all day long. In addition, the automated market maker leverages the XRP Ledger's inherent advantages. The XRP Ledger has very, very fast transactions. The XRP Ledger has very, very low transaction cost. These are things that will drive up the revenue and the efficiency of the automated market maker. So if the price of XRP goes up or down, and then it comes back in just a few seconds, if you were on a blockchain like Ethereum, there's no way that you could harvest that volatility because your transactions take several minutes to confirm. There's just no way that you can make that work. But because it is so fast, the trading algorithm can convert volatility into yield much, much more rapidly. Higher transaction fees mean that arbitrageurs wait to transact. If the transaction fee is $13 and you're only going to make $10, you don't submit the transaction, right? You have no choice but to wait. But because the transaction fees are so low on the XRP ledger and the transactions are so fast, that means arbitraging is going to be more efficient and the pool is going to be able to capture more volatility for yield. XRPL's low transaction fees, high transaction fees make arbitraging so much more competitive and so much faster that it reduces the pool's arbitrage losses and increases the pool's volatility gain. Lastly, the XRP ledger doesn't have block producers. Block producers, if you know what, anybody know what MEV is? So these are block producers who are finding ways to essentially front run. It would be illegal anywhere else, right? Miners, stakers, block producers, whatever you call them, can front run AMM transactions. But you can't do that on the XRP ledger because there aren't miners, stakers, or block producers. The consensus process doesn't allow any party to be the dictator of the moment to run the block. This makes arbitrage slots more valuable and should increase the returns on the continuous auctions, resulting in more liquidity token destruction and more yield. One of the disadvantages of holding assets like XRP and Bitcoin is their volatility. All right, why do we have stablecoins? Because volatile assets are like hard to hold and use. I'm hopeful that this combination of features in the AMM specification will turn that disadvantage into a significant advantage. AMMs will harvest volatility for yield. Volatility will drive market makers, from which the AMM makes a spread, right? If the price of Bitcoin stays at $20,000, eventually everybody who wants to buy at $20,000 is bought and everybody who wants to sell at $20,000 is sold. It takes a movement in price to really drive that volume. And of course, volatility increases arbitrage of profits because the AMM gets more out of balance more, and the AMM gets a cut of those profits through the auction mechanism. So this could really turn the volatility of a digital asset from a downside to an upside. Super excited about it. There's been a redesign of sidechains. We can't put all of the DeFi functionality we'd like to have in the XRP Ledger main chain. We would lose its capacity to provide great payments. Cannot do it. So in the next half of the year, we're going to be focusing on sidechains to allow people to build fully functional dApps. We're going to have an EVM-compatible sidechain. We'll allow assets to move. And this will provide a good list of advantages. One of the important ones is horizontal scalability. However many transactions we make the XRP ledger able to do, that's how many transactions per second it's going to be able to do. And people are always going to want more. And with sidechains, you can create additional ledgers or additional chains that have their own transaction per second limits. And so you get that horizontal scalability, right? In almost any other space, if you want more capacity, you fire up another server, you get double the capacity. You fire up another one, you get another 30%. You can't do that on blockchains, right? You can't just fire up another XRP ledger instance and have another 1,500 transactions per second or something. So sidechains will give us that capability. It will allow assets to move from chain to chain, so you can have premium assets. If you really like Ethereum as your asset, but you want the XRP ledger smart transactors, you can have that. Whatever combination of features you want, you can have. The obvious one is having XRP on an EVM-compatible chain, but that's like the one that most people would think of. But there are maybe people who want the reverse, right? If you want really great payments with ETH or really great, fast, cheap payments with Bitcoin, you want the XRP ledger's mechanics, but maybe you want these other assets. And so this gives you that combination, which allows people to innovate at the blockchain level. Like the great thing about Ethereum is you can innovate at the smart contract level, but you're stuck with the layer 1 parameters that they have. You get what you get. And if you don't like those, tough. You want more storage space? Tough, right? But this will allow people to innovate at the blockchain level. And it will also allow features like hooks or other features to be tested with real assets, and so they can make a case for adoption on the XRP ledger. As I was saying before, we don't want to break the ledger. What better way to prove that something is safe than to run it on a live blockchain with live assets and show that it works? The sidechains will let people do that. We'll talk about some of the innovations done at Ripple. We've been working mostly on sync time reduction to reduce the time it takes to start an XRP ledger node up. We're now down to less than 2 minutes in cases where the server has only lost sync for about 256 ledgers. We've drastically improved status reporting. Memory usage reduction, any of you who run nodes know what we've done. We've reduced memory consumption by more than 15%, which is extremely important to allow a sort of diverse ecosystem of nodes operating. If you run nodes hosted on cloud computing, memory is really expensive, like much more expensive than almost any other resource. And so bringing down that memory consumption is critical. Forward Ledger Replay has been a huge effort for us. It's the nature of the XRP Ledger's consensus algorithm that a very small number of servers occasionally lose synchronization with the network because of how fast it operates and because it doesn't make absolute certainty that everyone agrees before making tentative forward progress. So we want to reduce the node operating cost by reducing the need for resources to sort of catch up when the server goes out of sync and take the pressure off the network. Because if a server is out of sync, it puts more pressure on the rest of the network. They have to help it get back into sync, and then it can't provide services to anyone. So we've made a significant effort in this feature called Forward Ledger Replay. I won't go into the technical details. It also improves security against certain very rare attacks. Huge feature, huge progress this year. We've put all of this effort into performance and scalability, reducing the cost to operate a node, helping to push decentralization further out. We want people to run their own nodes and improving the network stability and reliability. XRPL Labs made the signer increase amendment to increase the number of signers from 8 to 32 and allow metadata to be attached to those entries. This is extremely helpful for like enterprises, but it's also really useful for DeFi applications, where you may have like a consortium of nodes that have to sign a transaction and use these M of N arrangements, and having the maximum N go up from 8 to 32 natively makes those things work a little better. So I always hate when people ask me to predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully the AMM solution is going to be deployed. You know, we're going to see more enterprise DeFi applications, but we need you guys to build the future. We need you to tell us what you need. We need you to build things. XLS 20D is imminent. So, you know, everybody always asks me to look at my crystal ball. We're going to have NFTs. We're going to have the AMM. We're going to have hooks. It's going to get faster. Can't tell you anything else. I know everybody wants me to. So here are some links: the XRPL Foundation, the XRPL Viewer, and a link for XRPL grants. We need you. Thank you. So great to be here.
Thanks, David. That was awesome. I'm sure everyone here is incredibly excited about the tech innovations of the Ledger and what's coming down the pipe for the community to continue to contribute to. Next, we have Head of Analytics and Compliance at the XRP Ledger Foundation, Thomas Sokya, and Advisor to the XRP Ledger Foundation, Scott Branson. Their session will cover the state of the foundation. Please welcome Thomas and Scott.
Hi, I'm Thomas, and I'm the Head of Analytics and Compliance at the XRP Ledger Foundation. And with me on stage today, I have Scott, who is our advisor on education and on social outreach. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for coming. Last year, we did 2 simultaneous events, one here in Vegas and one in Tallinn in Estonia, both of which we had very great feedback on. But even though it's a longer trip for some than others to go here to Vegas and meet him this year, it's just really exciting to bring together a larger group of the broader XRP Ledger developer community this year. So I think we're a lot of people from all around the world. So just to start off with a little background. The XRP Ledger Foundation was founded in 2020 as a non-profit entity. It had initial funding from the XRP Ledger stakeholders such as Ripple and Coil and GateHub. We don't have any overlap on the board or in the management with the foundation benefactors, so we operate completely independently. The foundation operates with 4 key focus areas. Number 1, research and development, including developer relations, core development, API development, and open source repository facilitation. And number 2, reliable access to the XRP Ledger, and this includes publishing a UNL. It includes reliable full history access and transaction submissions. Number 3, social impact. For example, through the collaboration with educational institutions. And number 4, connections, such as facilitating meetings and networks between XRP Ledger stakeholders. So a lot has happened since Apex last year, both with the core XRP Ledger itself, where we've seen new features being amended, such as the tickets and negative URL, but also the huge leaps in development of new feature proposals, like the native smart contracts and expanded signer lists. And last but not least, of course, the native non-fungible token support that, if all goes well, appears to go live in just about a week. But also in the broader XRP Ledger community, where a lot of new projects have seen the light of day, an increasing interest in using the native ledger features such as issuing tokens, and the overall revived and increased interest in building on and for the ledger. This keynote can't possibly cover everything that happened the last year, so we'll be addressing some of the few things that has had our dedicated attention, before looking ahead at some of which is in focus for the coming time. We launched the token assessment framework in March, starting with self-assessment for token issuers. All token issuers are invited to complete a self-assessment questionnaire, whereafter the information is publicly available for investors to research and make personal quality assessments. The true primary objectives are to achieve better transparency for investors and also to improve self-regulation of the crypto entrepreneurs who are building and issuing tokens on the XRP Ledger. Since the launch of the token assessment framework, 165 different tokens have completed the self-assessment process. The increasing use of the XRP Ledger we have seen in the past year has also led to revisiting and optimizing how we load balance and how the transaction routing is done on xrplcluster.com. In an average week, we now are handling more than 80 million connections from 10 million unique clients with more than 10 terabytes of data transferred. On average, there are 6,500 simultaneous connections, and it has had its peak in November of 2021 with a simultaneous 28,000 connections. So to handle the increased use, smart routing has been introduced behind the scenes. For example, so that full history nodes only handle the requests they can handle, and pathfinding is handled by dedicated pathfinding nodes. And requests related to current activity is handled by the non-full history nodes. In fact, when you connect to XRPL cluster, on average, a client is using 1.8 nodes behind the scenes. Clients are smoothly and fully automatically handed over between the nodes, either as nodes are being taken down for maintenance, or the automatic health checks that are implemented preventively hand over clients, or simply because of load balancing. All this has in the past year provided an uptime of 99.92% across all of the edges. In fact, most of the last 0.08% actually also had a response, but just a bit slower than 10 seconds. And this is example due to a failing backend node, so it's handed over. Behind the scenes, the server park increased in the last year from 18 to 38 nodes, scaled across all of the edges. And the edges are Frankfurt, San Francisco, New York, London, Singapore, Bangalore, and Toronto. So pretty global. Several repositories was also donated to the Foundation's GitHub organization that now hosts most of the core XRP Ledger projects, including the developer portal and several client libraries. The past year included noticeably community source code contributions as well, such as hooks with builders and libraries by XRPL Labs, and Clio by Ripple. The XRP Ledger standards repository has a lot of activity in the last year, with 8 new standard drafts submitted for discussion. For example, token-enabled escrows and payment channels, and a native automated market maker feature we just heard David talk about. All these standard contributions are public, and we invite everyone to participate both in discussing the existing proposals and by proposing new standards. And last but not least, since June, the XRP Ledger reference implementation, Ripple D, is under the foundation as well. I'll give the floor to Scott now, who will provide more updates from our educational and academic focus areas.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and really appreciate all of you being here. It's an incredible honor and a privilege to be able to address everyone and give updates on what the Foundation's been working on. So again, thank you all very much. Kind of continuing with the technology side of things, the XRP Ledger relies on UNLs, or unique node lists, to make forward progress. Each validator operator on the ledger must either use the software defaults, configure their own UNL, or subscribe to a public UNL, such as the Foundation's. Once the operator has installed their UNL, that node operator's validator will trust messages it receives from the validators included in its UNL. Those include proposed amendment and fee votes, as well as messages validating transactions contained in a given ledger. A lot of people want to contribute to the XRP Ledger by running validators, and I'm often asked by novice validator operators how they can get their node added to one of these published lists. Unfortunately, that's a really, really complex question for a couple of different reasons. First, I'm not responsible for building the list, not my area. Second, there's just an incredible number of factors, right, that are involved in putting together a published UNL. Some factors, like having a high uptime and having an easily identifiable operator behind the server, are pretty straightforward. However, ensuring that validators are geographically distributed and distributed across data centers and internet service providers can be far more difficult. Thus, you could end up with a scenario where there's 2 extremely high-performing validators, but only one of the 2 makes it onto a published UNL, perhaps because the second is hosted on the same network as an existing validator that's already on the publisher's UNL. It's also important to note that published UNLs are typically relatively static, and they can be very slow to change. It takes a lot of time for new validators to gain a reputation and establish trust. Also, there's a very real risk to the network if a bunch of malicious validators were to be added to a published UNL. We like to move at a snail's pace at the Foundation, generally speaking. Boring is safe for everyone, right? At the same time, a little excitement can be fun. As was publicized last year, there are ongoing plans for the Foundation's published UNL so that no one entity has more than one validator on the UNL. This is going to continue to add diversity as well as resilience to the network. Shifting a bit from the technology side of things, more to the social side of things that we've been working on over the last side of year, the educational side as well. So we've partnered with Ripple over the last year. We've launched an initial cohort of ambassadors. These ambassadors are very knowledgeable and passionate about the XRP Ledger. They're very well positioned to provide assistance to novice individuals and to businesses seeking to integrate with and build on the XRP Ledger. One of the primary goals the Foundation had in supporting the ambassador program was to provide more resources and access for businesses and enterprises. The ambassador program is divided into 2 distinct tracks. One track for student ambassadors, who are more focused on campus events, and a second track for community members, most of whom already lead projects and businesses. The ambassadors are a relatively diverse group. We have participants from more than 20 different countries. Yeah. and less than half of the student ambassadors are from the United States. However, some challenges do remain with regard to cultivating diversity within the ambassadors program, as well as the broader XRP Ledger ecosystem. At this time, less than a quarter of the ambassadors identify as female, and there remains disproportionate representation from the United States. The Student Ambassador Program in particular dovetails nicely with other foundation projects, since master's and PhD level ambassadors are typically prepared to conduct research and publish on the XRP Ledger. On the community side, there have already been 2 public community conference calls exploring important topics on the XRP Ledger, including how amendments pass, as well as deep dives into the XLS 20 NFT amendment and the upcoming Hooks amendment. Do stay tuned, as I expect the ambassadors are going to be scheduling another community call here soon, and they tend to have pretty neat guests. If you're interested in becoming an ambassador, go ahead and visit the webpage up on the slide, or get in touch with one of the existing ambassadors to express your interest and request additional information. New ambassadors are asked to agree to a code of conduct, as well as some basic expectations. So in addition to supporting student ambassadors, the foundation is also committed to supporting students as well as faculty in their scholarly pursuits. The primary goal of this support is to encourage cross-disciplinary collaborations. Through meetings that we've had with real-world stakeholders, the foundation team quickly realized an imminent need for a comprehensive, integrated body of knowledge about blockchain generally and the XRP Ledger in particular. For example, gaps often exist between computer engineering departments and legal departments. These gaps can be detrimental, though, as they leave developers vulnerable to potentially falling into massive legal holes of which they're unaware. And I think everybody in this room knows there's quite a few of those in this space. Similarly, these gaps also leave legal departments unaware of the real-world challenges that developers face when they're actually bringing a product to market. And this is a massive loss, right? Because legal departments are very well positioned to advocate for legislation that can balance regulatory needs against developers' creativity. Thus, the foundation consistently prioritizes interdisciplinary collaboration through academic funding. We receive overwhelming positive feedback from the faculty and students alike regarding the efforts we make to unite diverse disciplines around a common goal. That goal being better understanding of the XRP Ledger and the ways in which the ledger can be used to promote social good. Similar to other projects, we believe the efforts that we're making to promote cross-disciplinary collaboration now can be modeled more broadly at academic institutions around the world. The work that has been done to provide scholarships and grants has laid the foundation for some very exciting upcoming projects. So looking ahead, we're excited about the projects that we've accomplished over the last year. It's been a very productive year. We're eager to continue building on the projects that we've initiated, and we anticipate delivering several tangible outcomes over the coming months. While it's challenging to summarize everything we're working on in a half-hour presentation, as Thomas pointed out, let's take a brief look at some of the key upcoming projects and goals. So as I mentioned before, there are clear deficits with regard to blockchain law. These deficits are multifaceted, though, in that not enough legal professionals are explicitly trained in blockchain law, and also because there's an ongoing need to identify areas that require further knowledge or research. As regulatory frameworks continue to be refined, there is an increasing need for enterprises and governments to have access to competent counsel who are able to advise them on the nuances of blockchain. By partnering to develop this micro-degree program, the foundation hopes to increase professional competence with existing legal frameworks, while also creating a recursive process whereby participants within the micro-degree program identify gaps and additional knowledge or research areas which we can then subsequently address. The micro-degree is going to cover many topics, ranging from Web3, an introduction to Web3, and the concept of a metaverse, all the way through legal frameworks for tokens, as well as NFTs. The foundation is very fortunate to have an accomplished attorney, Napanai, as one of our advisors. She's going to be delivering a keynote tomorrow, so please do stay tuned for that. Napanai is going to be collaborating very closely with some of our partner universities' legal departments to make this micro-degree program a success. Similarly, the foundation has recently partnered with a very well-known development company in India, Ahom Technologies, to provide in-person training for students and professional developers to learn how to use and build on the XRP Ledger. India is an ideal test market for the training center, as technology and development companies are abundant. The idea for this training center was born from a real-world need, not only for more developers in general, but for developers with the particular skills to work with the XRP Ledger. While the curriculum is still being refined, it will likely feature a unique blend of foundational development skills that then build into XRP Ledger-specific development skills. The foundation team believes there is substantial value in face-to-face collaboration between developers. Brainstorming just seems easier, and ideas flow faster when everyone's together in person. Thus, the foundation plans to include XRP Ledger community members in these trainings, either remotely or in person through sponsored trips. In this way, community members can benefit from the trainings while also helping us to refine the content. So thank you in advance. This inclusion is also consistent with the foundation's goal of bringing diverse people together to benefit society generally and the XRP Ledger in particular. In addition to the numerous partnerships we've identified thus far, the XRP Ledger Foundation has also partnered with Taltech University in Estonia to explore ways in which the XRP Ledger can be used to expand access to clean, renewable energy. Yeah. This partnership will enable 3 project ideas to be piloted and refined, so that if these pilots are successful, the projects can then be exported to people and economies who are energy insecure. The foundation and Taltech both plan for all the code that's developed under these projects to be published and made available under open source licenses. The first project uses on-ledger escrows to lock funds that are donated to purchase solar panels. So funding is automatically released to an installer as soon as a micro power inverter that's attached to the panel reports that that panel is generating electricity. I think with how bright these lights are, I could start generating electricity up here. In other words, a donor can put into XRP into an escrow for a solar panel, and then a few weeks later, right, you as a donor can go online and see how much electricity that solar panel that you sponsored is actually generating, right? And that electricity will be going directly into classrooms, offices, and other places at the university. This project is really useful in that it enables professional academics to develop and refine electronic schematics, communication systems, and technology systems architectures, which can then be used for other larger scale projects. The second project that we're partnered with Taltech on around energy for is very similar to the first in that it uses the XRP Ledger to connect energy sponsors or donors with recipients who are in need. However, the second project differs from the first in that funds are used directly to purchase energy from a producer or a provider, rather than being used to create a network of solar panels that generates its own electricity. Thus, this project has implications for carbon offset markets, as well as clean energy producers looking to market their energy. The third project we're partnered on Taltech with for energy focuses on actually creating that marketplace for the energy. Of course, the XRP Ledger will provide the core exchange for that marketplace. If successful, such a market could be used to trade energy between producers, providers, businesses, and consumers. This project will also explore solutions for managing congestion within closed energy distribution systems, such as microgrids. The schematics and systems developed for the first project that I mentioned will be further evaluated and refined within the context of this third project. We're very eager to see how these partnerships and projects develop over the next year, and we think that there is real-world potential to improve access to clean energy. I'm going to give the floor back to Thomas now, so he can update everyone on what's been going on, or what's to come, rather, with the token assessment framework, the forensics platform, as well as the new data API.
Thank you, Scott. During the next year, we will introduce a second phase to the token assessment framework, where we are going to invite token issuers that has completed the self-assessment questionnaire to a validation process with a third-party auditing firm. Based on the output of this process through conversations and through reviews, the foundation will be publishing an advisory list for the broader ecosystem. While it can sound like the only goal is to hold the token issuers accountable for the public claims, we also hope, and we're pretty confident, that this process will help the adoption of many legitimate projects that have launched and are launching on the XRP Ledger. We are also currently working to expand the framework for non-fungible tokens, so NFT marketplaces should be invited soon as well. In the next year, XRP Forensics will be fully absorbed into the foundation as well. It will continue using the same methodology to flag and follow money of likely illicit accounts, but with additional resources to process data even faster as the XRP Ledger keeps growing. The best use of the intelligence that we gather from victim reports, from the community, and by following the money is not to work on a case-by-case basis. We will instead focus on expanding our partnerships so the intelligence that is collected has a faster and wider reach. Our hope is that when a law enforcement agency picks up a case from a victim to fraud or to theft that is related to the XRP Ledger, money could already have been traced by us or even been seized by an exchange that is partnered with us. We know that a lot of projects are still relying on the Ripple Data API for getting data that is not readily available in the XRP Ledger nodes itself. And since the API has been officially deprecated, there is an urgency to provide alternatives. And we're working on replacing this API. We're beginning with the most non-trivial data, and we're slowly expanding it as we get feedback from developers. The objective is to have one API, but use several different data stores behind the scene to serve the data that those data stores are best suited for. So naturally, we will be looking at using Clio for a lot of historical data. We'll look at graph databases for connected data, time series databases for exchange data, and so on. And in addition to the data API, we're also going to take over the maintenance and hosting of the existing public XRP Ledger BigQuery dataset, including several community-sponsored schema improvements for that. But thank you all for listening, and please feel free to poke any of us during the conference if you would like to learn more about any of the topics we covered today, or if you have any questions about the foundation in general, or if you just would like to have a chat. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Thomas and Scott, for highlighting the phenomenal work being done by the foundation there. Okay, up next, we have the CTO of Heirloom, who's going to talk about the future of identity tokenization. Please welcome Julian Verhel Del Dios.
Thank you for being here. I'm Julian Vergel de Dios. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Heirloom. And first thing I want to do is apologize to anybody who saw this picture on the website and was expecting to see a glorious mustache. It met its unfortunate demise a couple years ago. I do still have my quarantine hair, though, so hopefully that's a suitable consolation prize. I want to start by telling you a little bit about myself. So I got my start in cryptocurrencies in 2014. I was the founding engineer of a company called Gem. We were working on hierarchical deterministic wallets and APIs to make them easier to use. And then we pivoted into enterprise blockchain, specifically working on electronic medical records and building a decentralized network to share securely that information between multiple different parties. And the reason I'm bringing up that story is because it's actually pretty relevant to the main topic of my talk, which is as we were building these systems, we found ourselves in a weird situation where even though we had the ability to share these documents securely over the blockchain network, we had a really tough time figuring out where do we store identity information, specifically credentials, and how do we do it without some sort of centralized database. And I ended up leaving that company in 2017 before we'd figured it out, which was really unsatisfying. But in the last year or so, I found myself being pulled back into crypto. And as we were exploring what ended up becoming Heirloom, I discovered that this problem still existed, that there wasn't really any good solutions for a decentralized way to manage identities. So I want to start by trying to state the problem as clearly as I can, which is to start with this sentence. I think we've all heard some version of this, which is that blockchains are built to be trustless, or sometimes they use the word permissionless. And in a nutshell, it's that if any of the blockchains that we're talking about today, so XRPL, Bitcoin, Ethereum, with any of them, you can spin up an address, jump onto the network, and just start transacting. No one can tell you you can't do that. No one can kick you off. You don't need to ask permission from anybody to do it. So if you go further back in history as well, the early days of the internet and the web were built similarly. So the protocols that run those, TCP/IP, HTTP, DNS, those are all largely permissionless protocols as well. And they promoted interoperability and free flow of information. And probably most importantly, they gave us mechanisms for circumventing gatekeepers for a lot of the ecosystems that existed at the time. So looking at things like publishing or finance or other media like television, most normal individuals were relegated to being passive consumers. And if you wanted to create, if you wanted to share your ideas, you usually had to beg these gatekeepers for access to the distribution channels. So with the internet and the web, it broke that paradigm with a permissionless ecosystem. So while blockchains and to a large extent the internet and the web were permissionless, human relationships and the way that we form them are not trustless or permissionless. And what ended up happening is because the protocols that I described, either for blockchains or for the internet, have no opinion on how we form those connections with each other for the purposes of trust and relationship. What ended up happening was that the decisions about how that ends up being implemented is left into the hands of a small number of people at very large companies. So as an individual user, I end up having to trust them even if I don't. So as an example, let's talk about Gmail. So I have a Gmail address. I use it for basically every login credential that I have on the internet for all the services that I use. And at any given time, if I trip some algorithmic flag inside of Google services that says that I committed fraud or something like that, or if a hacker takes over my Gmail address and they change my password and they lock me out, I'm effectively cut off from my internet identity. That includes my access to messaging to talk to my friends and family. That includes access to things like banking and the control over my money. And that also includes access to things like government services. And Google's not alone in this scenario. You have Facebook, you have LinkedIn, who are both identity providers as well. They lock up our social information and sell them off to advertisers. They lock up our professional information, sell them to recruiters. And then same scenario can happen to me. I can get cut off from my identity and my ability to access those ecosystems at any time. Now, one thing that I think is going to be a little counterintuitive to say here is that I don't think that they're being malicious, at least not from an identity perspective. I don't think most of them sat and said, we want to control your identity and be able to cut you off from it at any time. What I think happened was that the protocols, like I mentioned, have no opinion about how these things are done. Therefore, they had to do the best that they could to build useful products on top of them. But that still lives us in a situation where there's a single point of failure for our ability to control our identities on the internet. So how do we take back control over that? So what's missing is a dedicated identity layer. A layer where we more closely model how we form relationships as humans between either whether that's peer-to-peer between two people or one-to-many with large groups of people or between people and companies. We need an identity layer where people are aware of the choices that they're making from a trust perspective and puts them in the driver's seat. So the identity story in Web 2 isn't great, as I've mentioned. But with Web 3, the promise was that with strong cryptography and these permissionless networks, that people would have control over their identities and their assets in a way that wasn't previously possible. But the truth is that Web 3 is starting to look a whole lot like Web 2 did in the beginning. So just like an IP address doesn't really tell you anything about the party that controls that server and whether or not you can trust them, an XRP, BTC, or ETH address doesn't tell you anything about the party that you're transacting with and whether or not you can trust them. There's already big companies in Web 3 that are starting to apply Band-Aids to the cracks that are forming. So OpenSea, for example, is doing manual verification of creator accounts to tamp down on fraud and centralizing that information. Coinbase, if you want to transact as a person who resides in the US, you have to go through a know your customer and anti-money laundering process where you trust them with your information. And that this is an effort to comply with US regulation. And then on the subject of KYC AML, there's also a ton of institutional money that wants to get into Web 3 but can't until the KYC AML process is figured out. So I don't think, again, to restate it, even in Web 3, I don't think that they're doing this maliciously. I think that the protocols don't solve this problem by design, and these companies are doing the best they can to build products that are useful. So what do we do about this? What does the solution to this look like? The good news is that the building blocks that we're missing in Web 2 in order to do this are already present in Web 3. So we're just not using them to solve the problem yet. So Web 3 solves one of the core problems of what's known as self-sovereign identity, otherwise known as SSI. As I mentioned before, there's no good way in Web 2 to store an identity without a central party. And the problem that we're trying to solve is that for any given identity, how do you know which credentials are valid without storing that in a database? So SSI seeks to solve that problem by leveraging the consensus mechanisms of a blockchain and allowing individuals to store that credential information and only under their own control, and allows third parties to be able to look that up on the trustless ledger, so that way you can guarantee that the credentials are valid. So let's talk a little bit about what the pieces look like inside of SSI. So the first building block is what's known as a decentralized identifier, otherwise known as a DID. So a DID is three things. The first is a universally unique identifier a string of letters and numbers. This is known as the DID string. Second is a document, which contains the cryptographic material that represents the authentication mechanisms that are valid for a DID, otherwise known as the DID document. And third is a set of procedures that define how you create, update, and delete a DID, as well as how a third party can resolve a DID string to a DID document. This is all collectively known as a DID method. So DIDs expose no private information. It's just an identifier. They're flexible enough that you can form connections with peers and form private connections between identities to send private messages, to authenticate messages. But they really shine when they're implemented on top of a blockchain for the reason that I mentioned. When they're implemented on top of a blockchain, you have a permanent identifier that's fully controlled by its creator and can be referenced by a third party on a tamper-proof and censorship-resistant network. So a DID represents a powerful mechanism for doing things like logging into websites, creating secure communication channels, but it doesn't quite solve the problem of trust all by itself, the way that I described it. It's not that different from an IP address, except you now have cryptography that you can use to prove ownership of the identifier. We still need a mechanism for establishing the trust lines between identifiers. So that's where verifiable credentials come in. So verifiable credentials are the next building block in the SSI stack. They're a mechanism to allow one party, otherwise known as the issuer, to attest to a set of claims about another party, otherwise known as the holder or the subject. So it's cryptographically signed using the issuer's keys to guarantee the integrity and authenticity of the document. And finally, there's a presentation mechanism that allows for selective disclosure of what's inside of the credential itself. A relying party, otherwise known as a verifier, can view this document and it can be guaranteed that it came from the issuer that it came from. And the presenter can use zero-knowledge proofs as well to maximize their privacy. They don't need to use DIDs in particular. These are actually two separate technologies, but if you combine them together, you get a one-two punch of a self-sovereign identifier and a portable self-certifying credential. So those are two pretty abstract concepts. Let's talk about how this would work in practice. So I want to introduce Amy. Amy's a Web3 native. She has bought a few NFTs already. She has a Coinbase account. She's staked coins in DeFi. She's heard that there's a bank called Big Bank that has just launched a new liquidity pool that she wants to participate in. So Big Bank's a US company, and Amy is a US person, so therefore they're subject to KYC AML requirements by the US government. With SSI, though, what Amy can do is establish an identity directly on the underlying blockchain. And the way she does that is she sets up an identity wallet, which is a piece of software that you can download onto your phone or onto your laptop that knows how to generate keys, knows how to compose a DID document, and knows how to register that identity directly on the network. Before she is able to transact with the liquidity pool smart contract must see a verifiable credential that includes an issuer DID that is in an allow list. So Big Bank can choose a certain number of companies that they trust to do their KYC AML processes. So in this particular example, we're going to say that Big Bank has chosen Clearances R Us LLC, Discount KYC Inc., and Trusted Partnerships. So Amy has already had a bad experience with Clearances R Us. They have kind of a janky website. They don't really do a good job of disclosing what they're going to do with your data once you've passed their processes. Discount KYC Inc. had news of a breach a few weeks ago, so she's a little skeeved out by them. So she decides to go with Trusted Partnerships. So Trusted Partnerships is going to do their standard KYC process with Amy. She's going to submit some documents. They're going to do due diligence. They're going to decide whether or not she gets a credential. So in this example, she's good to go. So they issue her a credential. So the credential is going to include Trusted Partnerships DID as the issuer. It's going to include Amy's DID as the recipient. It's going to include some data that shows that she passed KYC AML. And then it's going to include a signature that is from Trusted Partnerships DID document to prove that they're the ones who indeed issued this document. And then this gets added to Amy's identity wallet. And at that point, it's completely private. No one has to know about it except for Trusted Partnerships and Amy. When it comes time for her to transact, Amy can direct her wallet to create a zero-knowledge proof of the credential itself. And directly on-chain, the liquidity pool can look at the credential, see that it comes from the DID belonging to one of the trusted parties that are allowed to do KYC AML. It can verify that the signature is valid for that particular identity. It can verify that it contains the required claim, which is that Amy passed KYC AML. And finally, that the signature in the document itself comes from Amy's DID. So in this whole scenario, Amy was never in a situation where she had no access to her identity. She was in full control the entire time. She had choices around who to trust and to what degree. There were 3 companies that she could choose from. 2 didn't meet her criteria, but 1 did. And throughout all that, she was also able to maintain her privacy on-chain. The only thing that shows up on-chain is that there's a DID and that it passed KYC AML, and that's it. So why am I talking about this here at Apex? So we've been building on the XRPL at Heirloom since we started the company. We build low and no-code tools for large enterprises to dive into Web3 and build engaging experiences for their users. We're especially excited about XLS20 and the NFT capabilities we're going to be able to bring to our customers. And congratulations to everybody at the XRPL Foundation that worked on that, by the way. But this question of identity keeps coming up as we're building for our customers. How do you know whether the issuer of an NFT is genuine? How do you know if a DeFi protocol is going to be abiding by US regulations and you or yourself are not violating US regulations by participating? And there's no widely adopted chains that currently implement SSI features as a first-level primitive. And most crucially, XRPL currently doesn't support SSI. But we think that this is a really good opportunity for XRPL to take the lead here because there isn't really a clear winner right now. They can be the pioneers for identity for both Web 2 and for Web 3. At Heirloom, we're working on draft specifications to see what this could look like as a new proposal for the XRPL. But we can't do it alone, and nor should we. Should be a community-driven effort. So I'm going to give you 3 things that I think you can do to help push this forward. The first is to push for adoption of SSI features in XRPL. Submit a spec, submit a pull request that actually implements some code, and participate in the community discussion around it. The second is, if you're building products on XRPL, start thinking about SSI and how that might apply to your users and to your business and how you can benefit from it, and then start building towards those goals. And finally, we'll be here for the rest of the conference. I'm here, my co-founder Nick's in the audience as well. Come find us if you're curious about this and you want to hear what we're doing, or join us on our Discord. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Great choice in demo name, by the way. I personally appreciated that. Now we're going to take a small break before we begin the breakout sessions for the day in Agave 3 and 4. But before we do, I wanted to give a glimpse into what you can expect for the rest of the day. So you'll hear about XRPL sidechains, which allow you to customize and experiment with your own blockchain while enjoying the benefits and functionality of the public XRP Ledger.
You'll also hear about innovations to the XRPL DEX. And as David mentioned earlier, this includes a proposal to bring an automated market maker or an AMM to the ledger. You won't want to miss that one, so make sure you see that presentation.
And most importantly, don't forget our party tonight starts at 7:30 p.m. at 24 Oxford. Hope to see you all there, and we'll see you tomorrow.
We're building a lot of different things, all aiming to solve the same problem. The best builders I know are pragmatic builders. Solving a real problem for people, building something that people genuinely love. The only way you get there is by using the best tools available.
The best thing we can do is empower other people to work with this technology.
The ability to operate crypto across networks has become increasingly critical.
Now that you've all had a chance to connect here, let's keep the conversations going.